Boom, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. It's funny, when I first created my intro, I wrote it out. I think I first created it. I actually had a few working. Sorry guys. I just I think my dryer went off in my house. I had a few, if you guys heard that, I had a few working intros to the video. And now, mind you, everything after that initial part, I do off the cuff. I have topics that I want to hit, but I just don't have the time to really sit down and go much further out much further in depth than just run of the mill thoughts about a given topic. And honestly, I actually think that that's better because I want my videos to sound authentic, free flowing. Sometimes they may get derailed sometimes, but I would rather have that than a robotic, super rigid show. But when I first created it, whatever the first working intro was, I think the first one I had was when I was doing a Facebook show and several episodes with Cavante Martin Manley. I posted the recording to multiple sites. I no longer do that because, to tell you the truth, there's not really much of a benefit, and it takes a lot of time to do it. Well, I used to have I used to record and upload to Anchor. Anchor was bought out, and Anchor would post it to either Anchor or SoundCloud would post it. I think it was Anchor would post it to iTunes and other linked accounts. But again, there's really not much of a purpose for it because ultimately anybody who has access to Anchor or to iTunes is going to have access to YouTube. Okay. YouTube comes with every phone, every iPad, iPhone, computer. So I just upload to YouTube. And I say that to say that in my intro, obviously, I say wherever you may be listening. And I said that to mean whatever site or platform you were listening on: Facebook, uh, uh, Periscope, Anchor, iTunes, SoundCloud. But now, really, more so, what it means is wherever you may be listening, as far as what your actual location is as a listener. So, anyways, today, guys, we are going to be discussing the Iowa defensive line group for the 2024-2025 Iowa football season. We're continuing our positional preview or positional primer. I've said this in previous videos. Everybody titles it differently. I like position preview. It's nice and to the point. And the defensive line actually is one of my favorite positions. I think Kelvin Bell has done an excellent job as a coach, developing the talent that he gets, and as a recruiter. He's actually been one of the best recruiters on the Iowa Hawkeye coaching staff, which makes sense. He's got a great personality. He played for Iowa. And I actually think in a lot of ways, I've said this many times before, I think that this is the best recruiting staff that Iowa has had in the Kirk Ferentz era. I would say that going back, I'd probably say the last 8 to 10 years, even when Derek Foster and Tim Pulisic were here. You know, Kelton Copeland maybe wasn't the best wide receivers coach. It's hard to tell how much of it was him versus Brian Ferentz and the Iowa offense and the lack of imagination, creativity, so on and so on. But Iowa has had coaches that have connections to Iowa, either knowing the coaches and having some connection somehow, or literally playing for the university. And I'm okay with that. I don't love the familial connections. I'm not completely against it. And I readily admit that it's just the world that we live in. It's not supposed to be the case as far as the laws go or what is considered ethical hiring practices. But I'm not completely against it per se, because at the end of the day, what the most important thing is production. And whether you have a familial connection or not really doesn't play a factor into whether you're going to be productive or not. But it does play a factor into whether you were deserved of the position. But nonetheless, Iowa has had a really solid recruiting staff, and Kelvin Bell is a part of that group. He played for Iowa as a defensive lineman. He has familiarity with the University of Iowa. He loves the University of Iowa. And he has continued to build with the University of Iowa. And then, of course, he had the former defensive coordinator that was a huge mentor of his. And they've done stories on that. And of course, who I'm referring to is Norm Parker. Kelvin Bell has been the Iowa defensive line coach since 2019. And according to his profile, it says throughout his coaching stint at Iowa, Bell has been involved in all aspects of prospect identification, working with the coaching staff in off-campus recruiting efforts and coordinated all aspects of on-campus recruiting activities. He was an on-campus recruiter as his early positions. So nonetheless, I think Kelvin Bell has done a great job. He's developed talent to the NFL. You think of Zach Van Valkenburg. You think of, I think AJ Epinesa would qualify. If I remember, I think he was in the 2017 class. I'd have to look that up and see for sure. Of course, there's Lucas Van Ness. There's Davion Nixon. It says 4 linemen in 2022 earned all Big Ten recognition. Lucas Van Ness and Joe Evans garnered second team laurels, while Noah Shannon and Logan Lee were honorable mention. Iowa's defense set a school record and led the nation with 25 interceptions. That really probably doesn't have much to do with my guy here, but Zach Van Valkenburg led the play of Iowa's defensive front, earning second team All-League. So those would be the main guys. AJ Epinesa earned first and second team All-America accolades while leading Iowa. I'm reading my iPad here, guys. While leading Iowa in sacks for the second straight season in 2019. Epinesa earned first team All Big Ten honors and was the defensive MVP in Iowa's Holiday Bowl win over USC. Epinesa, who declared for the 2020 NFL draft, had 2.5 sacks versus USC. So he has coached some solid guys. Speaking of Epinesa, that is it is the most important target remaining on the recruiting board. A recent crystal ball was put in favor of Epinesa, the younger brother of AJ Epinesa and Eric Epinesa. I'm talking, of course, of Yossi Epinesa, was put in favor of Iowa. I'm not going to talk too much about that because in the end, recruiting is very frivolous and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, especially if he ends up choosing a different school. But the main competitors are Miami and Utah. And this is a big deal. Huge deal. Iowa needs to land this kid. They have the inside track to landing him. They have the connection, the familial connections with his dad, his two brothers. I mean, they have to land this kid. So Kelvin Bell, I am very pleased with him. As for, and I'm going to be highlighting, just showing you guys how good the recruiting classes have been. If you look at last year's recruiting class on the defensive line, it may be the best defensive line haul in the last 10 years for the University of Iowa. Albeit a lot of them are developmental prospects, as they always are, but they're 4-star developmental prospects. So I'm going to be pulling it up here momentarily. Now, just to bring this home regarding Yossi Epinesa, for a time there, after he took his official visits to all of the schools on the top of his list, it seemed as though he was going to be headed towards Miami. Iowa became the third favorite, according to On3's RPM, to land him. Now Iowa is currently the favorite. So this is what I mean, guys. Recruiting is extremely frivolous, and that's just the way it is. This is last year's class, the 2024 recruiting class. And Iowa being ranked 29th, a top 30 recruiting class with an average score of an 88.36, which was up 1.6 points from the previous year, is in large part to the defensive line haul that Iowa had last year. So check this out, guys. We have Chima Chineke, who finished with a grade of a 91, according to On3. On3 is currently my favorite recruiting service. I still pay attention to the other recruiting services, especially 247 Sports. But what you guys need to know is, what you guys need to know about the recruiting services is the same guy founded all of them. So each time it's gotten better. You know, I don't think he founded ESPN, or maybe not Scout. And of course, Scout was bought out by, I think, Rivals or 247 Sports. I think it was Rivals that bought them out. But if you like 247 Sports or Rivals, so it went Rivals, then it was 247 Sports. So if you like Rivals, then you should like 247 Sports. If you like 247 Sports, you should like On3, because it's the same guy. He's just gotten better each time he starts a new recruiting service. I remember, and I've told this story in the past, when I drove a semi truck, I would commonly listen to Clay Travis and on Fox Sports. And of course, he was branching out, talking about other things. And he started doing one-on-one interviews with pretty big names and having great interviews. And one of them was with this guy. And I don't think that that's something that a lot of people know, is that the same guy started all of them, or the major ones. Now, On3 does things a little bit different, especially in basketball. How they rate a guy is based off of, it's primarily based off of what their highest ceiling looks like at a professional level. Are they good enough to get to the next level? Their rating is directly reflected on their highest ceiling and whether their highest ceiling is good enough to be a professional prospect. Whereas some other recruiting services maybe do that, but not totally intentionally and not totally across the board. They will also rate a guy purely off of his high school production. But this is an intentional thing that the recruiting service for On3 tries to do. I read when I did Chris Tadjo's recruiting video, because he was rated as like a 93 by On3. I read the article that described this. So if you guys want to check it out, go and check out my video I did for Chris Tadjo, the Canadian-born Latin NBA Academy 4-star, according to On3 recruiting site. By the way, guys, before I continue with this, just want to give some clarification on my kids' day video. I wasn't planning on doing this. I wasn't planning on doing a reaction to the kids' day practice, which I discuss why in the kids' day video. I'm not going to say it here. No need. Suffice it to say, I saw the highlights and I thought it was something that I needed to discuss, specifically how Cade McNamara looked. So I recorded it the night of the kids' day practice. And I go to sleep because I recorded it kind of late. I go to sleep right after, and I wake up in the morning and check out the video, as I always do, because I rewatch the video to see if there's any things that I can do better on. Maybe make the show more efficient, be more articulate, more succinct, things like that. There's always improvements that one can make. It's never going to be a perfect show. And the audio was messed up, so I had to re-record it. And I recorded it using my Rode mic rather than this mic. And the Rode mic's really good, but it's what I usually record when driving. And so I recorded the first part here in the morning before I went to the gym, and then I recorded the rest before and after the gym. So go and check that out. That's the explanation there why I had to delete the original, the OG, and re-upload another one. So Chima Chineke out of Texas, this was a massive get. He was highly recruited with a grade of a 91. I think he's a bit raw, but honestly, guys, I can absolutely see him getting into the rotation, especially on special teams. The common factor that you are going to see with this recruiting class is the high ceiling that each of these prospects have, because they play multiple sports, and Iowa as a whole, with regards to football players, loves to get multi-sport athletes. And I've given the explanation in the past that, number one, being a multi-sport athlete just says a lot about you as a person, your work ethic, so on and so on. But the other thing is that if this is what you are, playing multiple sports, what can you possibly be when you start focusing on one sport? And that's the approach and then the third thing is there are applicable aspects to playing other sports that are advantageous to being a good football player. And Iowa takes on that approach. And so what you're going to see with the defensive linemen is a lot of them have that high ceiling and they played multiple sports. They ran track. Chima Chineke ran track and field. And there's going to be another one that did that as well. All of them are multi-sport athletes. And of course, Iowa likes to recruit defensive linemen rather than purely defensive ends or purely D tackles. They will, but by and large, I would say over 50% of the time, they recruit guys that they just see as solid defensive line prospects. So that's Chima Chineke. Then we have Jack Campbell's brother, Drew Campbell. And this was not a lock to land this kid. He has a grade of a 90. He was actually graded higher before the end of the recruiting cycle. He was like a 91, 92. So he actually dropped a point, unfortunately, but they still had him as a 4-star. And it wasn't a lock. I mean, he was legitimately considering some other schools, including Iowa State. But ultimately, Iowa prevailed. I think that he will end up playing on the interior, not per se due to athleticism, but he has that initial frame. You know, I know it says here that he's only 225, but I think he actually weighs more than that. Of course, we can look at Iowa's current roster. I'm going to go back to the On3 recruiting profile, but let's look at some of the weights for the true freshmen here and some of the other defensive line prospects that are kind of in that sophomore range. They're redshirt sophomores. They've been at Iowa for 1 or 2 years now. They've got the weight, and now it's time for them to take the next step towards receiving reps game in, game out. So we have Devin Kennedy, who was a really nice get under the radar. He ended up receiving an offer from Penn State. I'm going to go back to his recruiting profile momentarily, where his dad played, and he ended up choosing the Iowa Hawkeyes. 6'2", 265 pounds. I can see it going either way. And this, yet another track athlete. He originally played a different position before hitting the weight room hard. He was a late bloomer. Had he not been such a late bloomer, he probably would have had many more offers. But given the fact that his dad played at Penn State, he knows that Iowa has a really good coaching staff. And so he completely shut down his recruitment when he officially committed to Iowa. He's from the state of Arizona, went to a good high school. I can see it going either way. I can see, due to his height, which isn't terrible, he's about the same height as Joe Evans, 6'2". I can see him going on the interior, and he obviously has the ability to add a lot of weight, as he was able to do that massively from his junior to senior season. I can't remember what position he initially played, but that is the story, that he was not receiving a ton of interest. I think he was playing basketball as well. And he hit the weight room hard, and he ended up committing to Iowa. Psychology parents are Jimmy Kennedy and Dwanid Hicks. Father played at Penn State, where he was the 2002 Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year, first-team All-American, a first-round NFL draft pick, and 10-year NFL vet. Has brothers. Football letterman as a defensive lineman. Open to Growth Award team captain as a senior. He also lettered in basketball on top of doing track and field. So I can see it going either way. I really like him as a prospect. I think he's got a high floor. I think he could play inside or out. Inside would be due to his height, but if he plays on the outside, it will be due to his explosiveness and athleticism that he naturally has. And it's there. I mean, we know the genes are there based off of his dad. So I think it can go either way. He's already at 265, which is great. I mean, he really, depending on which direction he goes, he really only needs to add, I would say, 15 to 30 more pounds, which is definitely still a lot of weight. But if he stays on the outside, I would say, 265 is not bad. But if he wants to comfortably be a consistent Big Ten D end, he probably should want to get to, I'd say, about 275, 280 minimum. And if he's going to play on the interior, I would say he needs to get up to 290 minimum and up. You look at Aaron Graves, he's at 300 pounds. Caden Crawford was a high school quarterback. And we've seen that before with Iowa offensive linemen and defensive linemen. I like him as a prospect as well. I think he's got a ton of upside. This is going to be a big year to see if he can make that jump. He loves being in the weight room. I remember during his recruiting stuff, seeing some of his weight training videos. He's still a little small at 261 pounds. So I don't know if he's struggling to put on weight or what. But this is going to be a big year to see if he can start emerging as a rotational piece. We have Chase Brackney, redshirt freshman. This is going to be his second year in the program, 6'4", 291 pounds. He's probably going to start playing on the interior, if I had to guess. 291 is good. 6'4", he's got an excellent frame already. Brian Allen, 6'4", 260. See, Brian Allen, shows, I think he should try to get up to 270, 280. But, you can play at 260. I mean, Joe Evans played consistently at 245, 250. But if you want to be at every down defensive end, you got to get above 270, I'd say, or 265 at least. Joseph Anderson, 6'5", 224 pounds. We'll go look at his recruiting profile. This is my second favorite prospect, or like 1B. The other one is Chima Chineke. They are both very similar in that they're a little bit undersized weight-wise, but they have the frame, they have the explosiveness, they have the size. And man, once they develop, if those two both end up playing on the outside, whoo, watch out, guys. I cannot wait to see what Kelvin Bell is able to do with these two guys. And then I'm looking for Campbell's brother here. That's the reason why we went over here. Chima Chineke is 240 pounds. So not bad. It's better than 224. 224 is light. Man, that's linebacker size. That's less than linebacker size. I mean, Jaden Harrell's 237 pounds. Zach Tweet, 240. Carson Sherrard, 232. So the last one I'm looking for is Jack Campbell's brother. Finally, I found him. I was starting to think to myself, dang, is he not on the Iowa roster? Did something happen? Because Iowa did lose one of their scholarship guys in Aiden Hall. I haven't looked too much more into that story. Maybe some of you guys have seen it, but I heard whispers that he was not going to continue with his football career at Iowa. But here's Drew Campbell, 6'4", 238 pounds. Not bad, but still needs to add much more weight, much more muscle. Just to put it in perspective, guys, for some of these freshman defensive linemen, obviously it seems Devin Kennedy is in the best position currently, which is not a surprise given his dad being a former Big Ten defensive lineman. I mean, his dad knows what's needed for his son to be successful at Iowa. And that's why Iowa recruits guys that are former Division I athletes, former NFL athletes, because they know what it takes to be successful. They have it within them. They have that knowledge. But just to put it in perspective, guys, Nick Jackson is a linebacker. He weighs 235 pounds as a linebacker. Okay. Xavier Williams is, where was he at? I mean, even James Razor is 212 pounds. So here we go. Xavier Williams, 5'10", 230 pounds. I'm not sure if that says much more about him than it does about the defensive lineman freshman, but still, holy crap. So they have to add some more weight. I think both are true. I think it says something about the defensive lineman, but also says how big this dude is. And then lastly, just to show you guys, there's Kenneth Merriweather. I think he's a good prospect. He's a redshirt freshman, 6'3", 255 pounds. Deontay Craig, starting defensive end, 6'3", 266 pounds. So you can play at 260 or above. I think the minimum that you would be pushing it and having to make up for it in other ways is probably 260. And we've seen rare circumstances where like Joe Evans was playing at 245, 250. Okay. If I remember correctly, I'd have to see. I mean, on the Iowa website, it has Joe Evans weighing 210 pounds. I'm not sure they've ever changed it, but this is his ESPN, 6'1", 252 pounds. So, all right, guys. So it is possible. So just to wrap this up on the freshman here, you see Drew Campbell was pretty highly graded, low 4-star, high 3-star. And then we have Devin Kennedy, who his highest grade was at 88 by 247 Sports. I think that's, in my opinion, that's the most accurate. But he was a mid 3-star prospect And again, he was a late bloomer. Iowa snagged him up. He shut down his recruitment. And sometimes because of that, there's not a ton of evaluations or analysis that's done by the recruiting services. Joseph Anderson, I said I'd talk about him. He was probably the highest graded defensive lineman. Everybody loves his upside. Also a son of a former Division I athlete. He has a grade of a 91 by On3, a 90 by 247 Sports, 76 it looks like by ESPN, and a 5.7 by Rivals. Just to wrap this up on Anderson, and this was the case for pretty much every Iowa defensive line recruit minus Devin Kennedy, who I think his other big offer was from Penn State. But Anderson chose Iowa over Nebraska, Kansas, and his father, Benny, had a 6-year NFL career as an offensive lineman with the Baltimore Ravens. So, I mean, like I said, guys, that connection is there. And this is definitely one of the best defensive line hauls that I have seen in recent memory. And you know, Kelvin Bell's done a great job. I do want to note that it's not just Kelvin Bell. Abdul Hodge has been good. LeVar Woods has been good, because sometimes due to their regional or area recruiting, for example, LeVar Woods was in as the primary for his recruitment, but it came down to Iowa, Oklahoma State, Vandy, Kansas, Texas Tech, and Iowa for Chima Chineke. So let's talk about the actual group that will be the main contributors for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And how do I see this group? Well, I think this group has a ton of upside. I don't think they have as of yet an AJ Epinesa or a Lucas Van Ness, but I think they have a lot of solid players across the board and emerging talent. You know, Deontay Craig is an up and comer. He was a former high 3-star, low 4-star prospect out of the state of Indiana. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if he takes a big jump. Ethan Herkett has been consistently in contention. He was a former high school linebacker, converted to defensive lineman. He has been in contention, but he's been injured. The main thing for him is staying healthy. Iowa did end up losing Ontario Thompson from the 2023 class. Here's Chase Brackney. These are his grades. Here's 2023's recruiting class. Kenneth Merriweather here. Another defensive line prospect, state of Michigan. And then, as you guys can see, Aiden Hall did not continue playing with the Iowa Hawkeyes. We have, I thought for some reason he was in the 2024 class. So he actually was, he must have been on the roster for a year then. And then I don't know why I was thinking he was a part of the 2024 class. He was a nice prospect. I think the problem for him was whether he was a wide receiver, a safety, or a linebacker, because he was kind of a tweener as far as size and athleticism goes. He had the athleticism to play all of them, but at 6'1", 200 pounds, I mean, that's borderline running back size. I think, in my opinion, he was more of a cash or safety. And nonetheless, I'm going to look into that later. If you guys know what happened to him, you guys can comment. Some of the other prospects, Maddox Borcherding Johnson, mid to high 3-star defensive tackle prospect. And I think that is it for that class. So I think Iowa has some really solid starters. The first four that they have are all multi-year, solid, legitimate Big Ten defensive linemen. All of them, in my opinion, have the potential to play in the NFL. You have Deontay Craig, you have Aaron Graves, one of the highest rated players to choose the Iowa Hawkeyes in the modern recruiting era. You have Y.A. Black or Haha Black, whatever. I always forget. I think it's Y.A. or Ya or people are gonna think I'm poking fun. I'm really not. I think it's I've heard it multiple ways. Maybe I can just pull it up real quick so people don't think I'm making fun. So I found it right here. 94 days until this is from Blackheart Gold Pants. It's why yay, which is in the numerous examples I gave, but a traditional it is a common Arabic name, and it is pronounced. I literally just watched it right here. Yaya. For what it's worth. Oh, you guys can't hear it because I don't have the share sound on. Nonetheless, you have YA Black, who could have left for the NFL, but chose to come back, which I think was the smart decision. He also was plagued with some injuries last year. And then you have Ethan Herkett, who has multiple years of being in the mix, receiving snaps, being behind some really, really solid defensive linemen, Joe Evans, of course, Lucas Van Ness. All of them are really nice pieces that I think have potential to play in the NFL. If I had to rank them as far as NFL prospects go, I would probably rate it Aaron Graves as number one, Y.A. Black as a close second. I mean, Y.A. Black, his size and athleticism, it doesn't grow on trees. How Iowa got him, I still do not know. I'd probably go Deontay Craig 3 and Ethan Herkett 4. But behind them, that is where the question lies. This is the current depth chart. You have Max Llewellyn, who is a really big developmental prospect. He was a 4-star by 247 Sports. A lot of people liked him. He hails from Urbandale High School. So it's good to see him starting to come on. He has great size at 6'5". So yet again, that's another example of Iowa finding a kid that is maybe not like an established 4-star level guy, but is a low 4-star based off of the potential once he's able to grow into his frame. You have Jeff Bowie, who's been in the program for a long time. He's part of the same recruiting class as Max Llewellyn, one of the best recruiting classes Iowa has had. It was a top 25 recruiting class. Now, it hasn't panned out that way, but that's what it was as far as the recruiting rankings go. And then there's Jeremiah Pittman on the defensive tackle spot, Brian Allen. They're all nice pieces. And then behind him, you have Caden Crawford, Kenneth Merriweather. They are the other two scholarship defensive linemen. You have walk-ons Luke Gaffney, who I believe was an offensive lineman. Actually, no, I think he came out of high school as a D tackle. And Will Hubbard out of the state of Nebraska, both preferred walk-ons. So the players are there. The personnel is there. I mean, this is a really, fruitful, depthy position group. They have the players. They have the potential. They have the size, the athleticism. It's all there. They just need somebody to emerge. This group doesn't currently, as I said, have a Lucas Van Ness or an AJ Epinesa, but it doesn't mean that that can't happen. I mean, Aaron Graves, I could see that happening, no problem. Y.A. Black, I could see that happening, no problem. Deontay Craig, I could see him having a big year. The main thing for this position group, and this is what I'm going to say to wrap up this video, is going to be based off of the emergence of this second unit. Are there going to be some of the true freshmen that I highlighted that are able to see some snaps? Are they good enough to see some snaps? Or are the guys who have been in the program for a while now, are they finally ready to take on a bigger role and solidify snaps being used on them? All of these guys were really solid prospects. You know, Brian Allen, Jeremiah Pittman, man, I can't believe he's already a redshirt junior. Max Llewellyn, Caden Crawford, Kenneth Merriweather, they're in that in-between range, that second and third year range, where it's time to start putting it into practice, putting it on the field with legitimate production. So I really like this group, guys. There's not really much more to say on it. If I had to predict this group, I think Aaron Graves is going to have a really big year. Of course, this is assuming everybody can stay healthy. I think he's going to have a big year. I actually think Ethan Herkett is going to surprise. We have heard a lot of positive things about him from the Iowa coaching staff for many, many years now. And if he can stay healthy, he is the type of guy that we see pushing through. I mean, how many guys like Ethan Herkett have we seen that end up pushing through in their final year, where they stick with it, they stay on the Iowa program, they stay on the Kirk Ferentz program, final year, boom, huge year. I wouldn't be surprised to see it at all. I mean, this is not like an underdog story. I mean, the guy's a legitimate 6'3", 200 and whatever, 60 plus pounds. I mean, it's not a Joe Evans situation. I think Deontay Craig should be shooting for a minimum 5 sacks this year. I think as a group, they should be hoping for, I would say, minimum 20 sacks as a team. So last year, Iowa ranked in the top quarter. I like to break it down into the first 50, the second 50, and then the bottom 20, 30 teams. Iowa was 45th, which I think is just fine. Could the numbers be better? Of course, they can always be better. But I think as long as Iowa is top 50 in sacks, they're doing just fine, because Iowa's defense is not predicated on sacks. They're just not. They're predicated on bending but not breaking, keeping everything in front of them, forcing the other team to make a mistake. They had 33, but they pretty much have their defensive linemen one-on-one all the time, and having to get a bulk of their production 1v1. But they had 33 team sacks. I know I said 20 minimum. That would be bad. I would say they need to have minimum 30 team sacks. Preferably, I would say 33, just to duplicate what they had last year. But 33 is not bad. And, we see Deontay Craig. He had 3 sacks last year, 18 solo tackles, which is not bad. I'm going to pull up the other team stats for Iowa so we can see kind of what they look like last year. So Logan Lee, that's a loss, of course. He's off to the NFL. He's doing okay. And here we have Deontay Craig, total 54 tackles. That he had 18 solo tackles, 3 sacks. I think he needs to try and bump that up to 5. I think if Joe Evans had 9.5 sacks. Not bad. I didn't realize he almost had 10 sacks, dude. Not bad. Good for him. And I even said last year, I can see the NFL utilizing him as purely a sack specialist. Aaron Graves, 2.5 sacks, 36 total tackles. Y.A. Black, 51 total tackles, 3.5 sacks. So, again, Y.A. Black, if he could get to 5 sacks, if, Ethan Herkett could, bump his number up to 3 sacks, hopefully 5. I know that's maybe not his specialties, more of a coverage defensive end or a plug defensive end. But that would be nice. So I think this unit's fine. How good this defense is going to rest entirely on, well, not entirely, but mostly on how much growth this Iowa defensive line is able to have moving forward. Going into the season, they're not the most talented group going into the season in the last 5 years as far as defensive lines go. But I will say that they, as I've said throughout this video, they do have some pieces that can make this unit much better than people realize. And by no means are they a bad unit. That's not anywhere near what I'm saying. But they're definitely not on paper going into the season one of the best position groups Iowa has. But they do have the players on paper that would make it, if they are able to elevate themselves, not surprising if, like I said, indeed they do that and thus make their unit one of the better units on the Iowa staff roster. I think right now they're probably somewhere in the middle with the ability to, with regards to the development of a few guys, to elevate that. And a lot of that is going to depend on the guys behind the first 4. How are they coming along as a unit? All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to smash that subscribe button. Let's get this channel to 2,000 subs. At the very least, like, comment. Let me know what you guys think of the defensive line group in the comment section. Last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and facts are feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. I love you guys. Stay tuned for the rest of the positional previews. I have the secondary. I have the linebacking group, and of course, the special teams unit, kicker and punter. I'll probably add the kicker and punter to one of the linebacker secondary videos I do. And stay tuned for that. I have plenty of time to get it done before we have the first game of the season. I can't believe we're almost here, guys. It's crazy. All right. See you guys next time. Love you guys. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.